Hello everyone, I am Kenshin. Welcome to Speaking History. The book I want to share with you today is A Guide to Medieval England, The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and also turn on the little bell. Thank you. Today, there are countless themes of crossing in many novels, movies and animations, but most of them are based on fantasy or the future world. But if you are thrown back to the past known as the Dark Ages, what will happen in England? Today, let's use this Ian Mortimer's The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England as a guide to take a trip. The first thing you see after arriving is different from the modern city streets. No matter where you look, the highest skyline must be the church of the place, usually located at the highest place in the town. Because of this proportion, whether it is the surrounding city walls, city gates, or even houses, they all seem small and unnoticeable. People of various professions live together in the town. Whether they are butchers, blacksmiths, pubs or doctors, they all live equally in the town. The clothes they wear will overturn past prejudices, and the diverse colors appear more vivid in the sun. Even the rich and powerful will use feathers to decorate themselves. Walking on the street, in addition to English, you will also hear foreign businessmen speaking French, and even Latin or Celtic. In short, people come and go, and it's very lively. Even if the actual number of residents is less than imagined, looking at the whole of England, only London can be compared with the continental cities with more than 10,000 people, but the proportion of travellers is quite high everywhere. Compared with the luxurious mansions of the rich, when you walk to the living environment of ordinary people, you can describe it in a few words: damp, dark, mud, and even the houses in the poorest areas. Compared to sleeping on the street, it's just better to have a roof to shelter from wind and rain. The houses near the square or the main road are all high and narrow, with 3 to 4 floors not exceeding 5 meters wide, and most of the first floor is used as a shop. The residences of the rich and powerful are on the side of the street, and most of them are wooden structures without exception. Stone construction will not become more common until the next century. Due to the attack of the Black Death, more than 1,000 villages were abandoned. If you think that the medieval English village is picturesque and the thatched cottage is full of flowers, please forget it completely. It does not exist in this era. In fact, rural houses can be described in 4 words: extremely simple. The thatched cottage farm with function as the main orientation is impossible to consider the comfort function, as long as it meets the needs. How many people were there in England at this time? Due to the Black Death, the population was halved by the end of the century, leaving only about 2.5 million. Even considering the area of the English Isles, it is still a very small proportion. How long you can live depends on where you live and how much wealth you have, not your physical condition. Most farmers will leave the world before the age of 50, and the poorer ones may die before they are 20. For example, dying at the age of 18, which is just an adult today, is so common. Because of this relationship, children at the age of 7 were expected to have the ability to work, because the same age was on the gallows. Women can legally marry at the age of 12, mature at 25, and by this time they have probably had 5 or 6 childbirth experiences. Just 10 years later, they begin to welcome aging. Here you can quote the words of the character under Chaucer's pen: "A 30-year-old woman is like winter grass." Of course, some people live to old age, even in their 80s, but those are bishops, knights and other noble classes, which have nothing to do with ordinary people. Coming to this era, you have to make money to survive, right? This is closely related to social class. The class responsible for fighting, including kings, lords and knights. If you cross into a noble, it's okay. For example, the richest Lancaster earl can earn up to £11,000 a year. But if it is a general rural lord, the annual income may only be between £40–50. The difference is not a little. But you can still live a decent life. What about farmers? The status and income gap between self-farming farmers and serfs is far apart. Self-farming farmers own their own real estate and livestock, and serfs cannot leave the manor for a day. However, when the Great Famine occurred, the economic situation of the two reversed, and the self-farming farmer families who were forced to sell their land under consecutive years of arrears, only survived by labor. Since we are talking about this, let's talk about the food, clothing, housing and transportation after crossing. Everyone knows that British food is monotonous and boring. So what was it like in the Middle Ages? There was only the concept of 2 meals at this time, and there was no idea of breakfast. The first meal of the day was lunch at 10–11 o'clock, which was also the most important meal of the day. Dinner was around 4–5 o'clock. Due to the influence of religious precepts, eating meat was strictly restricted. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday and special days cannot be eaten. Calculate that it is about half a year. What if you eat meat on these days? After being reported, you will be sent to the religious court, and you will only be pardoned or punished after confession. The staple food of this era is bread, especially rye bread. White bread can only be eaten on special days. Of course, if you cross into a noble palace, it is not limited. There is also a food that is also a staple food, that is soup. At that time, eating meat was also a symbol of status. With different status, the types and quantities of food eaten were also different. Unlike many places, eating fish is a symbol of status, especially in inland areas, and fish is allowed to be eaten on days when meat is forbidden. As for the general people's drinks, that is beer. Because the preservation period is very short, they all hope to sell out as soon as they are brewed, but if they are not sold out before they become sour, they will add spices to cover up, so this kind of flavored wine appears in the tavern. Some areas also have apple wine or pear wine to choose from. This kind of wine has a high alcohol content, but the price is half of the beer. What about clothing? If you are before 1340, the dress of ordinary people is basically not much different, but at the end of this century, the change is very obvious. First of all, the color becomes more vivid and eye-catching, but the biggest change should be attributed to the invention of buttons, which allows everyone to wear a coat like modern people can open the front, instead of wearing a robe like a monk. This also allows the clothes to be tight and elegant, and the only dissatisfaction is probably the elderly, obese and conservative clergy. What about shoes? The most obvious is the appearance of pointed shoes. After the 1330s, for some reason, people on both sides of the English Channel competed to wear the longest shoes. It is unknown what psychology is based on, that is, you have to get used to this kind of shoes. By the time of Edward II, it was almost impossible not to be tripped by your own shoes, which is funny, right? The most famous is the 20-inch crack of shoe. Because the tip of this shoe is tied to the garter sock, it is impossible to go upstairs. It is really a great person to be able to walk normally. The difference in men's and women's clothing was not really highlighted until the second half of the 14th century, especially the skirt styles worn by men and women, which are increasingly gendered. The most popular hairstyle among ladies is definitely the parrot snail style, which is the most popular among the nobles. Of course, ordinary people don't have that leisure time to tie and maintain. Ordinary people in the city live in low, single-story buildings, filled with smoke and filthy smells all year round. On the other hand, the residences of wealthy merchants are much better, such as the merchant Richard who sells tallow candles, that mansion by the Thames. The long storefront in front is rented to merchants. After passing through the large courtyard, you will come to the entrance courtyard, followed by the luxurious hall. All the furnishings will make anyone feel exquisite, including down beds, silver-plated Christ crucifixion statues and so on. How about religious monasteries? Honestly, in this era, it should have the best sanitation system, with its own water supply system, sewer system and even flushing facilities. But I have to tell you, there are no compartments, no privacy, meaning you will enjoy this time with the person next to you. What about travel or outings? You might want to ride a horse or take a boat. If it's a long journey, you might need the cost of a guard, because at that time in England, bandits were not too rare. Even if you hit the road conditions are unpredictable. The highways at that time were basically the legacy of the Roman Empire, up to 10,000 miles. But due to the long time, the conditions vary greatly, The places where carriages often pass may be severely worn, and even the paving stones will be moved away to build other buildings. You may not have been on the road for long, and you encounter the road being blocked by a fallen tree, and you have to turn back and look for other alternative roads. There is also the fact that the land on both sides of the road must be cleared for 6 meters. The reason is to prevent thieves from attacking in the bushes, but we know that regulations are regulations, but whether they are implemented depends on the place. In many cases, it is not that they don't want to, but they don't have the ability to do so. One of the travel choices mentioned earlier is horse riding. Ordinary people have no chance to use war horses. The price may be several times the annual income. What ordinary people can buy is about 5 to 10 shillings. The worst is the blind horse. This is the most common number because it comes from stolen horses. Blinding is the only way to prevent finding the way home. What about carriages? General carriages are not used to carry people, but for cargo purposes, such as beast traps, hay, and even the best is to carry the armor of the lord class. As for the 4-wheel passenger carriages that appear in animations or film and television works, I'm sorry, there were no more than 12 such carriages in the country in the first half of the year. They were only used by royal noble women when they went out, which also reflects the asking price of hundreds of pounds. Indeed, it is extraordinary. Next is the biggest question everyone has if asked whether they would like to go back to the past era. That's medical care. After all, in modern society, a little bit of illness and some over-the-counter medicine will do, but in medieval England, it's not the same thing. Almost everything in this era is harmful to health, including every family making fires outdoors. The carbon dioxide and other substances generated by burning are also a great harm to the respiratory system of the people at that time. What about the river source of drinking water? I'm sorry, although there is no pollution from heavy metals and other chemicals, there are more than enough from excrement to dead animal bodies, and the water supply system has no filtration to your mouth. Do you think it's safe? To put it more clearly, if you get sick, the suffering you suffer is definitely higher than in modern society. People of this era believe that getting sick is God's will, and diseases and physical pain are the process of purifying the soul. Not only do they need to accept medical treatment, but religious prayers are also indispensable. Even the cause of the plague, even the king sought help from astrology. We now think that filth is basically the hotbed of disease, and cleanliness is the best way to avoid it. The English people in the Middle Ages also have the concept of cleanliness, but they value the process of cleanliness rather than the result, and they also add religious concepts. Because bathing is a very time-consuming thing, the monks at that time only took 4 baths a year, and the nobles were a little better, which means that if you have the habit of bathing every day, you will be very uncomfortable. But from ordinary people to nobles, at least 5 times a day. Wash your hands, so it's not so unclean in terms of cleanliness. Finally, let's talk about the law. Many people have a deep impression of the tattoo punishment in medieval England. So there is a question, since there is a judicial trial, then the British people in the past, there were no police at this time, becomes very strange, right? In fact, the local 10-house joint guarantee system maintains law and order. Every man will join at the age of 12 and declare to uphold the law, and the number of people is not limited to 10. This is just a name. This 10-house squad member, if someone commits a crime, they will also be sent to the sheriff for trial. Although the county sheriff can arrest and imprison, the trial must be done by a judge in London. The question is, where does the law come from, knowing that the literacy rate at this time is not high? Strictly speaking, this is a simplified version of the old law of the Saxon era, revised by the royal judge, which is also the reason why only these judges can open a court for trial. If local officials enforce the law arbitrarily, there is a risk of breaking the law. There are even clauses that are still in use today, such as the Treason Act of 1351, where Edward III clearly clarified the line of treason, and it can still be seen in British law today. In short, when you arrive in medieval England, you need to be more mentally prepared than physically prepared. After all, it is too different from our convenient modern life, But there is also a benefit, that is, there are fewer temptations. If you are a devout religious person, you might even think it's not bad. Do you still want to travel after hearing these? If you want to know more, go find The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England to take a look.